So last week, as I listened into some coaching demos, I was really struck by how many coaches were ending their session in a non-coach-like way. They really weren't completing the session very effectively. So if you are someone who struggles with how to close your coaching session effectively, and you feel like things maybe just peter off, or like you aren't fully wrapping up the session, then you're gonna love the 4 tips that I have for you today. But before we get into those, first let's talk about what I consistently hear from new health coaches. I hear questions at the end of the session like, the coach asks, "Do you have any questions for me? What did you think of the session? Is there anything else you want to talk about today? Or how do you feel about the session?" Questions like those. And you may be thinking, wow, those actually sound like decent questions to me. Well, I want to dig into those and share with you why they aren't the best questions to ask at the end of your coaching session. So generally, those questions that I just shared with you that I hear consistently have an undertone of asking for feedback for the coach. They sound to me like the coach wants the client to tell them how they did. Or it's an opportunity for the coach to give suggestions by answering a bunch of questions. So let's take each one separately and talk a little bit about why they don't work so well. So first off, the question, do you have any questions for me? Well, what we want to remember is that the coach has the questions and the client has the answers, right? So we're inviting an opportunity here for the coach to actually demonstrate their expertise and share knowledge, which really isn't the point of coaching. So I really recommend that you skip that type of question altogether because it's not very coach-like and not very client-centered. The second one, what did you think of the session? To me, this feels like the coach is fishing for compliments, like they're wanting the client to tell the coach how great they did. And yes, of course, there will be times throughout your coaching process where you're checking in with your client, you're evaluating how things are going, and so periodically you will ask things like, how is coaching going for you? Is there anything we need to tweak or shift? But this is all about the coaching process and making sure that it's working for both you and the client. So I will give you some suggestions at the end on better questions to ask and what to do instead. So the third one, is there anything else that you want to talk about today? Well, I noticed that this is when the coach really isn't sure how to explore and process through the session. And they have all this time left over at the end wondering what they're going to do. So they ask, what else does the client want to chat about today? But we really don't want to be switching topics in a session. If you have a good outline for a 60-minute coaching session, it really should take you the whole session to get through one topic. So you really do want to keep it specific, and you want to make sure that you fully explore one topic and exhaust all of the possibilities and really come to completion with the topic by the end of the session. But really, we don't want to be switching gears and starting to coach through a whole other topic. So if you have a ton of time left at the end of your session, it really is a sign that you really aren't quite sure of what that comprehensive coaching process and flow looks like. Then, in this one, we also have the other instance, if you're actually at the end of the session time-wise, and then you ask the client, is there anything else you want to talk about? And the client says, yes, actually, I really wanted to talk about X, Y, and Z as well. Then you're not going to have time to cover it, right, on that session. So why bring it up, right? Why ask that question? There's no time left. Again, this also tells me that the coach likely didn't do a great job at setting the agenda for the session earlier on, which is really a key skill and a fundamental part of an effective coaching session. So then the fourth question that I commonly hear, how do you feel about the session? I really feel like, again, that is the coach fishing for compliments or to boost their ego. So what should we do at the end of the session to complete in a mindful and effective coach-like way? Well, I've got 4 tips for you. The first one is, instead of the question, what did you think of the session today? It's really best to help the client connect the dots and reflect on their learnings. So ask, what takeaways or insights about yourself did you have today? What did you learn about yourself? What are your takeaways from the session today? So can you see how these are much more client-centered questions? So then the second tip I have for you is, instead of how do you feel about the session, perhaps you ask something like, how do you feel about the subject now compared to the beginning of the session, right? To indicate their progress. Maybe ask a scaling question on a scale of 1 to 10. How confident are you that you'll complete the action steps? And then after all this, it's really powerful to share an acknowledgement and affirmation, recognition of your client. Saying things like, I noticed that you really dug deep today. I noticed a real shift in your energy today. I can see how this action step will help move you toward your goal. Maybe I noticed that you demonstrated empathy and kindness toward yourself today. I could sense a real value around family in our conversation today. Maybe it's something like, from our conversation today, I can tell that you're very resilient and courageous. Really, this part is all about highlighting their strengths, their values, and abilities. And then 4, finally, a nice way to end the session is to simply ask your client, do you feel complete for today? Maybe you haven't fully exhausted the topic, but for today, the client can say they are complete. So with these tips and questions in hand, you will close your session in a coach-like way, a mindful way, which is really going to leave both you and your client feeling complete, accomplished, and fully wrapped up for that session. And if you are interested in learning more about how to effectively guide a client through a 60-minute coaching session, my Brilliant Health Coaching Bundle has a video where I explain my 6-step health coaching session agenda, and I provide you with all of the scripts for what you need to say and do in each section and how much time to spend on each as well. The link for that bundle is in the description below. Happy coaching, everyone!